what have you seen? What kind of issues have we brought you this year?
Well, you keep bringing me all the sticky cards.
Pest issues. No, I'm not talking about the other issues.
Oh, okay. We're trying to monitor for all of the different bugs that are going to be coming in here. We have had quite a few pests this year, sort of similar to last year, but a little higher on the aphids seemingly this year. I know that when we've texted, it always seems to be the aphids that are kind of plaguing you the most.
We've also had some armyworms,
that was
right?
when we transitioned to this, right? So yeah, we didn't have the fall armyworm problems that we expected or that we had last year, but we have had a couple of other armyworm species that have come in. We've had some flea beetle damage on the amaranth in particular, the pigweed flea beetle. But one of the important things about getting these identifications of the pests, you've kind of explained to me how that may not be a huge issue, right? Because it's just the leaves that are being affected.
That is another beautiful part of the flowers, right? Is as long as the flower head itself is good and the stem is intact and relatively straight and the length you need it to be, if the leaves are affected, meh, the
thresholds are
different. Yeah. And the same thing, we'll talk about powdery mildew and zinnias. The same thing we've kind of observed with the zinnias is we have had powdery mildew, but it's on the leaves, not the flower head. And so, we're still managing it. We don't want it to get out of control. We don't want it to just be an inoculum haven, right? But it's less of an issue. And so we got hammered with pigweed
flea beetle.
We got hammered with that, but they were only an issue on the leaves. And so we're going to strip those leaves off. If you were creating a bouquet or selling them to a florist, you would be stripping the leaves off of those plants anyway. So the same with the sunflower. When we harvest these, all these leaves come off. So really, we're interested in what does the flower head look like.
But that also introduces complications because the threshold for people in beauty with a flower head is going to be quite high. So anything that starts getting up near that, we're going to have to wipe out at a much lower level. So when the aphids transfer from the tomatoes and get on the flowers, you got to get on top of them very quickly before they start causing everything to curl up or get the honeydew all over everything.
Right. And we do get, I think that they were armyworms last year. We had several armyworms actually affecting the blooms.
They were chewing on the flowers.
They were right on the flowers. And so that is a big no. There is no threshold. There is no tolerance in flowers, especially if you're selling them to a florist. There is no tolerance for any
unsightly damage.
Yes, nothing. They have to be basically perfect. So keeping that in mind. Whereas with lettuce, right, if something's chewing on the leaves, I guess that's up to someone's discretion whether they're okay with it. So the thresholds are just different, right? You might be able to wash it off or pull off that one leaf and it's still okay. Obviously, if it's a foliar disease, then probably the whole head is gone, right? Non-marketable.
But when we're talking about the flowers, I think it's important once you get them going and you start seeing those pests pop up on the cards or during your visual inspection, have some biorational pesticides on hand or advocate for people to have those on hand. Things like neem, spinosad, BT, all of those are going to help to knock back those early populations and hopefully keep them below any of your economic or action thresholds you might have.
Can you explain economic versus action threshold?
Sure. Maybe
you open that door, okay. We're going to walk through it.
Action might be the wrong word. Maybe aesthetic threshold would be a little more applicable here. But on an economic threshold, you would have set thresholds that have been established through data that's come in over the years where that if you time the spray, when you hit this number of bugs per leaf or this number of insects per sweep net that you take through the tunnel, that you are spending wise money. You're spending money when you need to, not before you have to, and you're also going to cut out a lot of the damage. So it's an economic decision. On the aesthetic or action end, it's much more, you can't have any damage whatsoever, or it's something that it's a little less tangible. It's more of like, you feel it. You just know that you got to get rid of these bugs because my examples are usually, people in a threshold for a bed bug. Are you going to have one?
Zero.
So
zero, there's no tolerance.
Cockroaches in a kitchen, like all of those kinds of things, I think are very, they're very evocative. But in this situation, it can be very similar. If you start to see any pest whatsoever on the head, you know that you need to do something or you're going to lose that aesthetic appeal. So it may not have the economic backing, but it's still a valid decision to make in an integrated pest management situation.
Right. And okay, so if you see one armyworm on one flower, there's never just one armyworm.
It's usually a harbinger of doom, right? An ill portent.
So that's like a ding, ding, ding. Get your stuff together, right? Get ready to.
That's one that could
get ready
be
to spray.
It could even just be one is enough to get you into the tunnel every day, maybe twice a day. Step up your monitoring to make sure you know. And then yes, have your BT on the standby. Have whatever it is that you're choosing to spray kind of ready.
So speaking of pesticides, so for managing the pests in this, we've got something here. We've got something. For managing the pests in these high tunnels, we go by scouting. So we go by the sticky cards, we go by what we see, and that is how we dictate when we're going to spray. For the fungicides, we in the high input tunnel, we're standing in here, we are going on a schedule, a weekly schedule or a 10-day schedule. And so that would be what, is often recommended. In our low input tunnel across the way, we are going only by scouting in that tunnel. So if we see disease, then we will apply something. So kind of looking at two different strategies here and what the economics and the production will shake out to be at the end. So Jonathan's found something.
I found a caterpillar. I accidentally stabbed it with my knife, so I don't want to show it to the camera.
Okay.
But I was just noticing there's some frass down in here. Can we
zoom in?
There's some powdery material that was kind of accumulating in the center of the flower, and I noticed a small hole in one of the petals, and then I found this fella kind of down in there. So the reason I talked about biorational sprays is since we are talking flowers, you will have pollinators that may come by and visit these as well. So wiping this out with a BT earlier when it's smaller would be a little bit safer version of pollinator and pest management.
Right. And it may have been, getting good coverage is also really important, because that would be really hard to necessarily get down into the head of the flower, right?
Yeah, you got to get down. For a lot of them, it's either getting up under the leaves, not just the top of the leaves, or it is getting down in all these nooks and crannies that we see on these different flower heads.
And we brought this up last time, but will you just remind people about sticky cards and how to use them most efficiently?
Sticky cards do have to be actively monitored. A lot of the places I've been to, I find sticky cards that look like they're maybe of a 2015, 16 vintage. They've been sitting there for a while. They've lost their stick and they're not doing their job. So we have to get out there and we have to replace these on a regular basis. We go a little overboard with our project. We do these every week just because we really want to know what's going on. But you should set up a monitoring schedule or teach your growers to set up a monitoring schedule where they're going to go out and replace these. We pop them into Ziploc bags. Other people have done the saran wrap, but I hear that causes some revolts with the undergraduates.
Yes, the undergraduates do not like using this.
So just getting them off, getting them into something so you can handle it and look at it, get a hand lens and take a close look at what's on there and do some identification, and then replace them so that there's always somebody watching your high tunnel for you, even when you're not present. The other thing to keep in mind is that they need to be at about the height of the plants. So this one is matched up with these plants on my right here. So that it's kind of at plant level. That way you're gathering the bugs as they approach the plant. If it's down here in the bottoms, you're probably not getting a lot of good monitoring going on. We do that with these clothespins, which I think is a pretty economic way of doing it. You glue them together, you get a pole of some sort so you can slide them up and down. When we have the tomatoes, we also use the wires that you pull down, right?
Yeah, we have used that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sometimes,
so, yeah, you can string them from above as long as they're not blowing in the wind, right? That could be bad for your hair or your face, right? If you walk into them. But
you also want more than just 2 sticky cards in a tunnel. We again go a little overboard because we're monitoring so many different plants and we're trying to do this integrated pest management rotation program. So typically it's going to be each end and a set in the middle. And then maybe if you want to do some extra, one on each side, so that you can know where the pests are coming in at, where they're sort of localizing within the tunnel, so you can go over there and take care of them.